The rain outside my apartment window sounded like applause, soft, relentless, almost mocking. New York nights had that effect on me. They made me remember. I sat on the edge of my velvet couch, a half-finished glass of Chardonnay in hand, staring at the phone screen that still glowed with a single message. "It's time we talked, Emma." My mother's number. After 5 years of silence, I took a slow breath, smoothing the sleeve of my silk blouse, navy blue, my armor for long days and longer emotions. On the glass coffee table, a folder of investment reports lay open, a reminder of who I'd become. Emma Hayes, 25, co-founder of a growing tech consultancy, woman who built herself from the ground up. But tonight, none of that seemed to matter. Because the moment I saw her text, my mind was dragged backward to that night. My 20th birthday. The candlelight flickering on my cake, my parents' hesitant smiles, the gift box trembling slightly in my mother's hands. And then the words that sliced through the room like a cold wind. "Emma, there's something you need to know. You're adopted." Even now, my chest tightens at the memory. But it wasn't that confession that haunted me. I can still feel the warmth of those candles flickering against my face, 20 tiny flames reflecting in the silver frosting. My mother's hands were trembling as she held the camera, and my father kept adjusting his tie, though we were just standing in our living room. Something about that night had felt rehearsed. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Mom said, her voice unusually tight. I closed my eyes, exhaled, and wished for nothing more than clarity, though I didn't know why. When I looked up, they were exchanging glances like they were deciding who'd jump off a cliff first. Dad cleared his throat. "Emma, there's something we should have told you a long time ago." The knife in my hand hovered over the cake. "Okay." Mom reached for my wrist gently. "You're adopted." For a second, I laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "What?" But their faces didn't move. My heart did. It sank. I remember the way the air seemed to thicken, how the smell of vanilla and sugar suddenly made me nauseous. Dad's voice was small. "We didn't want you to find out this way, but..." I cut him off. "Who are my real parents?" That's when their faces turned pale, bone white, like the life had been drained out of them. Mom's lips parted, but no sound came. Dad dropped his gaze to the floor. "Emma," he said quietly, "we don't think you should go looking for them." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Why not?" He didn't answer. Neither did she. Just silence. Heavy, trembling silence. The rest of the night blurred, me in my room, the gift box unopened on my bed. Inside it was a delicate silver locket, shaped like a tear. Inside, a faded photo of a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. On the back, engraved initials I didn't recognize. MH. That was the moment I decided I couldn't stay in that house. By morning, I packed a single suitcase. No note. No tears. Just that locket around my neck and a train ticket to New York. They had given me a truth I never asked for, but taken away the only certainty I'd ever had. New York didn't welcome me gently. It rained the day I arrived, hard, freezing sheets that soaked through my jacket before I could even find a cab. I remember sitting in a cheap diner near Penn Station, clutching a cup of burnt coffee and staring at my reflection in the window. The silver locket hung heavy against my chest. The initials AMH glimmered faintly in the light, like they were daring me to uncover their meaning. That first week, I found a shared apartment in Brooklyn with 2 girls from college I barely knew. Rent was high, privacy was low, and the radiator groaned all night. I took whatever work I could get, waitressing, data entry, even dog walking in the snow. Every night, I'd fall asleep scrolling through adoption forums and public records, hoping for a trace of my past. Nothing ever matched. Then came Lena Parker, my manager at the small tech company, where I eventually landed an internship. She was sharp, composed, the kind of woman whose presence filled a room before she even spoke. One evening, after catching me crying quietly in the break room, she sat across from me with her coffee and said, "You can spend your whole life wondering why people lied to you, or you can build something so extraordinary that their lies don't define you." Her words hit deeper than she knew. Under her mentorship, I threw myself into work, long nights of coding, learning business analytics, creating software tools for small startups. I stopped looking for my biological parents and started building a version of myself they'd never be able to ignore. The wins came slowly at first. My first independent client. My first real paycheck that didn't vanish into rent. The first time a CEO shook my hand and called me impressive. Each small victory stitched up a piece of the hole my parents' secret had torn through me. Still, I never stopped wearing that locket. I never stopped wondering why they were so terrified that night, why they went pale when I asked about my real parents. By 23, Lena and I co-founded our own consultancy, Hayes and Parker Solutions. We specialized in digital restructuring for struggling firms, and within a year, we were being invited to speak at conferences. People saw the power, the precision, the confidence. No one saw the girl who had once cried over a birthday cake. I kept my success quiet from my adoptive parents. A few polite texts here and there, mostly unanswered. I wasn't ready. Maybe I wanted them to live with the uncertainty of who I had become. Maybe I needed that space to heal. But healing has a way of circling back. It was 5 years later, just last week, when I received that message. "It's time we talked, Emma." And suddenly, all those years of progress felt fragile again. The day they arrived, Manhattan was glowing, late afternoon sunlight spilling between glass towers, taxis honking, life moving as if my world wasn't about to collide with its own past. I stood near the window of my office, 10 floors above Lexington Avenue, watching them walk through the lobby below. My mother in a pale coat, my father clutching his hat like a nervous schoolboy. They hadn't seen me in 5 years. The receptionist buzzed in. "Miss Hayes, your visitors are here." I took a deep breath, adjusted the gold bracelet on my wrist, the one Lena gave me when we signed our first $1 million client, and said, "Send them up." When they stepped into my office, I saw it immediately. The shock in their eyes. The quiet awe. The way they tried to reconcile the daughter they once controlled with the woman now standing before them, in heels, in command. "Emma," my mother whispered, "you look incredible." "Thank you," I said softly, offering them seats. "Would you like some water?" They sat, glancing around at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the framed newspaper features, the modern art that lined the walls. My father cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself." "I had to," I said simply. "You gave me a good reason to." There was a pause, heavy, awkward. Finally, my mother spoke. "We didn't come to fight. We came to tell you the truth we should have told you that night." My heart tightened. "About why you turned pale?" She nodded, her hands trembling. "We didn't just adopt you from an agency, Emma. You were found." "Found," I repeated, my voice sharp. "In a hospital that was later shut down. There were babies, taken, undocumented adoptions, illegal transfers. We were told you'd been abandoned, but when we asked questions, people warned us to stay quiet." Dad's voice cracked. "We didn't know the full story until years later. Your biological mother was part of that investigation. She disappeared before they could question her." I stared at them, the world spinning. "So you're saying my mother might have been?" My mother nodded quickly. "She worked there. A nurse. Her name was Abigail May Harper. AMH. The initials on the locket." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, heavier. All those nights I'd stared at those letters. They weren't a mystery. They were a confession. "You lied to protect me," I said quietly. "We lied because we were scared," my father whispered. "The people behind that clinic, they were dangerous. We thought if you went digging, they might find you." The anger I'd carried for years faltered. In its place came something else, grief, maybe, or understanding. Still, my voice stayed steady. "You should have trusted me with the truth." "I know," Mom said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We were wrong." I walked to the window, looking out at the skyline that had witnessed my rise. "And now? Why tell me this now?" My father's gaze dropped. "Because they reopened the case. And they're asking for you." The silence that followed was thunderous. I turned slowly, meeting their eyes. For the first time, I saw not the parents who betrayed me, but two people haunted by their own fear. Still, I wasn't that lost girl anymore. I was Emma Hayes. And this time, I'd face the truth, not for them, but for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window of my penthouse, city lights reflecting off the glass like shards of memory. The revelation replayed in my mind: the illegal clinic, my birth mother, the reopened case. But beneath the shock, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time, I was the one with control. When morning came, I invited them back. This time, the meeting wasn't in my office. It was at my home, modern, minimal, quiet. The kind of place built from peace, not pain. My mother's eyes widened when she stepped inside. "You live here?" "Yes," I said, pouring coffee for all three of us. "I built it myself, every square inch. I worked for what I have. No secrets. No lies." They sat across from me at the marble counter. My father's hands shook slightly as he lifted his cup. "Emma, we never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said softly. "But that doesn't erase the hurt." They both fell silent, waiting, unsure what would come next. "I've thought about what happens now," I continued, "and I've made a decision. I'll help with the investigation. I'll meet the investigators, and if possible, I'll find out who Abigail Harper really was. But if you want to be a part of this, there are conditions." My father frowned. "Conditions?" "Yes," I said firmly. "You both go to therapy. Together. No more pretending everything's fine. No more burying guilt under silence. And you tell the truth, to the police, to me, to yourselves." My mother's lip trembled. "We will. Anything you ask." I studied them for a long moment. "There's something else. You need to stop apologizing for what happened. Stop living in fear. I don't need parents who flinch at the past. I need people who can stand in it with me." For the first time, my father looked me in the eyes. Really looked. "You sound just like her," he murmured. "Who?" "Abigail. The nurse who refused to stay silent. She wanted to expose everything before she disappeared." A chill ran through me. Maybe strength wasn't something I built on my own. Maybe it was something I inherited. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling against mine. "We're proud of you, Emma. You became everything we hoped you'd be." I smiled faintly. "You hoped I'd be safe. I became brave instead." The power in the room had shifted. They weren't the authority figures I'd feared or resented anymore. They were people seeking redemption. And I wasn't the broken girl they'd hidden the truth from. I was the one setting the terms. The investigation took months. Questions, interviews, long nights filled with documents and buried truths. But eventually, the pieces fit together. Abigail May Harper had uncovered the illegal adoption ring at the clinic, and before she could expose it, she vanished. Her disappearance was never solved. What remained was a child she'd smuggled out to protect. That child was me. When I told my parents the full truth, they cried. My father held my mother's hand as though letting go would undo everything. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. Weeks later, I visited the site of the old hospital, now an empty lot fenced off by rusted metal. The wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers, and somewhere in that silence, I felt her. Not as a ghost or a tragedy, but as a strength running through my veins. Lena joined me there. She said nothing, just handed me a small envelope. Inside was a new chain for my locket, the one that had grown tarnished over the years. "She gave you life," Lena said quietly. "But you gave it meaning." That night, I sat alone on my balcony, overlooking the skyline. My parents were in therapy just as I'd asked. They'd stopped calling every day, but when they did, the tone was lighter. Softer. We were rebuilding something fragile but real, not out of guilt, but out of honesty. I opened the locket one last time. The photo inside was fading, the ink nearly gone. But I didn't need to see her face anymore. I knew her story. I carried her courage. For years, I believed my 20th birthday ruined my life, that it tore away everything I knew about love and belonging. But now I realized it had given me something greater: truth. I whispered into the night, voice steady and certain. "You didn't lose me, Mom. You saved me." And for the first time since that birthday, I let myself smile, not because the past was gone, but because I'd finally made peace with it. They told me I was adopted, I said softly to the city below. But that day, I learned I was chosen, by fate, by truth, and finally, by myself. Bottom of form.